Carlos Alcaraz lost in straight sets to Jack Draper last week and wasn't able to defend his title at the Queen's Club Championships. And you know what that means, an end to a 13-match winning streak on grass. And if Novak plays Wimbledon, Alcaraz won't be the second seed. Lately, everyone has had their unfiltered opinions and hot takes about Alcaraz, especially after his insane Roland Garros title run. For a few of these opinions, there's some compelling logic behind them, but others, are a bit of a head-scratcher. This is what tennis legends think about Carlos Alcaraz: the good, the bad, and the downright outrageous. After Alcaraz's big win over Zverev at the French Open, former world number 1 Boris Becker said that Alcaraz was already ahead of the big three when they were his age. He said, quote, "In my eyes, he's better at 21 than Nadal, Djokovic, or Ferrero were at the same age. And then the way he presents himself, you just have to like him. Who would have thought this day would come when a player would be seen as better than the big three, more so by a legend of the game?" Now, there's probably like 2 generations between Carlitos and the big three, so we already know that a lot has changed in the playing field, the technology, and literally everything else. Alcaraz already completed the Surface Slam at 21. Nadal managed to do it at 22. Federer had to wait until he was 28 years old, while Djokovic waited even longer, only doing so in 2016. I've always had a problem making comps across different eras because of how difficult it is to do so. For instance, from 2005 to 2022, hardly anyone had a chance at Roland Garros. It didn't matter if you were the best player in the world, you weren't getting past Rafa. Well, if you were Novak, you had a 20% chance at best, and the Serbian did manage to beat Rafa twice out of 10 times. The only other loss was that memorable 4th-round loss to Robin Soderling in 2009. You could make an argument that winning the French Open now isn't as impressive as doing it 15 to 20 years ago, and honestly, I'd say you have a point. But does this take anything away from what Alcaraz has managed to do? Not at all. We could also talk about Carlitos' win percentage against top 10 players at his age. Although he has more wins, he's only behind Nadal in top 10 win percentage. Now at this point, there's no doubt that Alcaraz is a generational talent. But circling back to what Becker said about Alcaraz, he's definitely the most accomplished player since the Big Three era. Judging from what he's achieved at 21, I'd say he's ahead of Federer and Djokovic at 21, but I think it's a much closer call against Rafa. Still, it gets even crazier when we have a listen to what Mats Wilander said about Alcaraz recently.
Yeah, I think once he realizes that he has to play like this in certain matches, less drop shots, less fancy, I mean, he's going to be nearly impossible to beat because he obviously is great when he's aggressive and he's great when he defends. And to me, today, he showed that he's going to be as good as Roger, Rafa, and Novak at defense.
Wilander basically said Alcaraz will become impossible to beat when he cuts down on the fancy side of his game, and I thought that was interesting because I had a similar opinion. Alcaraz has almost every shot in the book, but also has an eye for the spectacular. However, his French Open title run showed he could win ugly, moonballing when he needed to, and engaging in long cross-court battles. It's safe to say that no one wants to see Alcaraz change his attacking identity. However, on days when he meets his match on offense, it would be even more impressive to see him find nuanced ways to strategically beat opponents off the back foot. He already does that most of the time thanks to the combination of his speed, athleticism, and of course some insane shot making. However, one area has been questioned at times. Alcaraz's problem-solving ability has been questioned on some occasions, particularly when he's without his coach Juan Carlos Ferrero in his box. Examples include his loss to Sasha earlier this year at the Australian Open, and most recently to Jack Draper at Queen's. How did Draper neutralize Alcaraz's insane abilities on defense? Let me tell you. We all know that Alcaraz trumps everyone when it comes to winning points from disadvantageous positions. That didn't happen against Draper though. Looking at data from Tennis Insights, Alcaraz's steal score was only 20%. This essentially means that he won only 20% of points on defense, which is way below his tour-leading 40.9% average for the year. Draper's lefty forehand cross-court peppered Alcaraz's backhand repeatedly, and that proved to be a major difference. Draper didn't win a lot of points on defense himself, but he got handsomely rewarded for his relentless aggression. But is all of this really a concern for Alcaraz? I don't think so. He's played a lot of tennis lately and only had a couple days off after winning the French Open, so I'm not about to make a big deal out of it. We would be deceiving ourselves if we really expected him to maintain those high levels of intensity throughout. However, one area that does need to be talked about is that problem-solving ability, specifically without Juan Carlos Ferrero. Ferrero didn't travel with Alcaraz to London. Being a family man and having his academy, plus other stuff going on, he usually doesn't travel with Alcaraz to every single tournament. And for this, some fans have been quick to point out how poorly Carlos seems to perform at times without his coach. Personally, I think that's expected when you're missing a top coach. However, that's not to say that Alcaraz is a deer in the headlights without Ferrero. He's actually won a couple of tournaments without him there. That being said, it would be even more impressive to see Carlitos fully adjust to opponents who come up with new ways to impose themselves on him. Alcaraz recently admitted in an interview with L'Equipe that he mostly follows instructions from Juan and usually doesn't know what to do on many occasions, which led many fans to believe that he actually has a low tennis IQ. As Alcaraz becomes more experienced though, these things should follow, and just like Wilander said, Alcaraz will become a lot harder to beat when he trims the so-called fancy aspects of his game in favor for a Djokovic-like efficiency. Speaking of the Joker, he has said in the past that Carlos is the most complete player he's ever played. Djokovic was among the many tennis stars who congratulated Alcaraz after his Roland Garros title win. But one thing that struck me was how some fans are quick to write Alcaraz off after one loss or a bad tournament. He's probably a victim of his success, and it's easy to imagine why. After his Wimbledon title last year, most of the talk was about Alcaraz falling off, a title drought, more frequent upsets, and injuries. But looking in hindsight, was it actually that bad? Here's a graph showing Alcaraz's performances from Wimbledon in 2023 to Roland Garros this year. Let me ask again, was it that bad? The answer is no. However, when you're the most complete player outside the big three, then not winning any tournament you participate in isn't considered good enough by many fans. And I think that's where we're at. I believe that we could make room for these random losses because they're likely going to happen every now and again. Highly respected tennis legend and commentator Paul Annacone reached the Wimbledon quarterfinal in 1984 and was world number 12 in his prime. He also coached big names like Pete Sampras, Roger Federer, Tim Henman, Wawrinka, Sloane Stephens, and Taylor Fritz. Annacone gave his breakdown about Carlos Alcaraz on Tennis Channel after being compelled to do so following some hot takes about Alcaraz. Annacone believes that Alcaraz is the most complete player we've seen, and of course doesn't think Alcaraz has a low IQ on court. Here, take a listen.
One of, if not the most talented and complete player I've ever seen. He can do everything from anywhere on the court, and on grass it requires a little more nuanced creativity, and he's got that, and he can hurt you from anywhere on the court, and I think because of that on grass it makes him more dangerous. I read after Paris there was a bunch of stuff that was written about his low tennis IQ and things like that, which I found kind of comical. Yeah. I think the reason people think that is because he does chat with Juan Carlos Ferrero, who I would chat with if I was playing for
Right.
sure. Guy's former #1 great coach.
But let me ask you guys, with on-court coaching legalized, do you think this changes the game for the worse or the better? Do you think Alcaraz and his generation will become less reliant on instincts and more analytics-driven because of their coaches? And do you think it takes anything away from what players achieved back in the day? Former world number 4 and 1997 US Open finalist had his own assessment of the coaching situation and how Alcaraz has benefited from it. Here's what he said.
I think the coaching rule is well into effect. Let's not forget, he won his first US Open when the coaching rule came into effect in 5 sets in the finals as well. He won his Wimbledon finals in 5 sets, and I think the relationship with Juan Carlos Ferrero allows him to reset. It'd be fascinating to see if you weren't allowed to have those conversations, whether it would be different. Maybe not.
Not trying to take anything away from Alcaraz's achievements, I think it's also pretty safe to say that there might have been the possibility of a different outcome in some of those matches where Carlitos had to talk with Ferrero to find some solutions to the problems he was facing on the court. Still, on the coaching subject, Ferrero had his own assessment of his protege following the French Open final. In an on-court interview with Eurosport, Ferrero expressed his concern, explaining that Alcaraz failed to execute the initial plan against Zverev during the final. Ferrero went on to further express his worries about Alcaraz almost always trying to play an extravagant brand of tennis that usually ends up going against him. Here's what he had to say.
Sometimes he wants to play too good. Yep. I mean, he doesn't need to play all the time that incredible level that he wants to. Sometimes he needs to slow down a little bit, put 2 more, and then maybe go to the net to drop shot, but then come back. Stay more time at the top level mental.
Judging from many of these comments, you can tell that Alcaraz isn't a work in progress. So it's not like he always follows those instructions to a T. Sometimes he may have problems with either understanding them in the heat of the moment or the problem might be with the execution. But looking at their partnership, there's no doubt that it's one of the best in the game. But now, let's talk about his upcoming title defense. Alcaraz has 2,000 points to defend at Wimbledon. Only 22 different men have won the Wimbledon singles title since the start of the Open era, and only 12 of them have lifted the trophy on multiple occasions. Alcaraz has already made it clear that he's hungry for more majors, but I found it quite interesting to see that not many experts are backing him to go all the way in his title defense. Former British #1 Laura Robson saw her career cut short by injuries. She had to deal with recurring wrist problems and multiple hip surgeries, which eventually forced her into retirement. The former world number 27 believes that there will be a new winner at Wimbledon this time. With a knee injury putting Djokovic's participation in doubt, Robeson said, quote, "I'm going with Jannik Sinner. He made the semis last year, is now the world #1, and I feel like Carlos Alcaraz doing it back-to-back will be even harder," end quote. I'm pretty sure many fans are also thinking the same thing. Personally, I think Alcaraz is a top 3 contender regardless. That's literally the case for every Grand Slam he plays. With the 21-year-old already drawing level with Andy Murray and other tennis legends in the Grand Slam tally, questions have been asked on how many slams Alcaraz will finish his career with. Former world #4 Tim Henman has an answer to that question.
I think he can win 9 or 10. Yeah, maybe double figures. I mean, he's that good, and sure, there's going to be opposition, there's going to be new players that come up, but his skill set, his game is so complete, his athletic ability is incredible, his attitude, his competitive spirit, it's all there, and it's going to be fascinating to see how he goes.
Personally, I think this is one of the safer bets to make. Will he surpass the big 3? I don't know. I think it's way too early to be talking about that at the moment, because this guy literally still has his whole career ahead of him. Going at his current rate of 1 slam per year, while also factoring in some bad years, I think Alcaraz will reach double figures in slams for sure. Not to mention, he has the potential to totally win multiple slams per year as well. But more than anything else, health will be a major factor determining how many majors Carlos ends up with. Switching gears, let's talk about Alcaraz's Olympic doubles pairing with Nadal. Earlier this month, Spain's Olympic tennis coach David Ferrero announced that Alcaraz will be playing doubles with Rafa at the Olympics. It's something we all wanted as tennis fans. Ferrero shared his thoughts about the partnership, and here's what he had to say. Quote, "We're all excited. Rafa is a great doubles player who already won a medal in Rio with Marc Lopez. Carlos has played fewer doubles, but he has so much potential that I'm sure he will do very well," end quote. We know that doubles has been on the decline in tennis. Generally, many fans don't really care about it, and the top singles players don't really play doubles that much. Alcaraz has only played a handful of doubles matches in his career, but with the Alcaraz-Nadal Dream Team confirmed, there will definitely be a lot of interest. Do you think Alcaraz will make a great doubles partner? I think so. But looking at Carlitos' schedule, he'll probably have no time to practice with Rafa literally until he's in Paris. Alcaraz might also be in for a little learning curve for the doubles partnership to be successful, but it's something he can definitely do. The K section of the Olympics Code of Conduct published by the ITF in accordance with the IOC states that coaching is banned at the games, and those found guilty could be fined up to £15,000. Not just that, they could be potentially defaulted. The law states that, quote, "Players shall not receive coaching during a match. Communications of any kind, audible or visible, between a player and a team member may be construed as coaching," end quote. A player could be penalized according to the point penalty schedule if there are even suspicions. Alcaraz may likely be without Ferrero, which is going to be a disadvantage for him at the Olympics. It'll be interesting to see how he performs there. But this next tennis legend doesn't think Alcaraz is the typical Spanish player. Michael Chang won the 1989 French Open at 17 years old, and he remains the youngest man in history to win a major. Chang believes that Alcaraz doesn't play like other Spanish players. In his words, quote, "When I see Carlos play, I tend to think he's not the typical Spaniard. For me, it's as if a new generation of Spanish players has emerged because the ones I competed against had great ground strokes, they moved very well, they hit you with a lot of topspin balls, and occasionally with sliced balls. For example, the Sanchez-Vicario brothers used the slice a lot. Now, however, it's different. You just have to see how Alcaraz attacks the net and how athletic he is. He's very different from the classic prototype of the Spanish player," end quote. Watching Alcaraz early on, I thought clay was going to be his best surface by a mile. but having seen him develop, you can tell that he's just as good on other surfaces. In fact, Alcaraz says, quote, "I grew up playing on clay, but I feel a lot more comfortable playing on hard courts. I think my game suits the clay courts very well, but I just wanted to be a good player on every surface." End quote. What are the specifics that make Alcaraz's game successful on all surfaces? Here's what I think. Alcaraz doesn't have an obvious strength that can be tied to a surface. For example, Federer had a great serve, footwork, slice, and volleys that made grass more perfectly suited to his game. Nadal had the lefty topspin that caused balls to jump so high on clay, and he was also the ultimate retriever, so clay was his home. For Alcaraz, he does a bit of everything. On the faster hard courts, however, Alcaraz can be rushed and the field is a lot stronger too. On clay, he seems a bit more prone to mistakes, like we saw during his Roland Garros title run. I'd say the bread and butter of Alcaraz's game, though, is on the slow medium to medium fast courts at Indian Wells, Roland Garros, and Madrid in previous years. We can throw in Miami and the US Open there as well. For many of us, Alcaraz's performance at Wimbledon this year would help paint a clearer picture because last year's performance just came out of nowhere. At the moment, Alcaraz has the best win percentage on grass, followed by clay, and then hard courts. Obviously, he's played a lot more matches on hard courts and on clay. So now to the big question. Does tennis need Alcaraz and Sinner at the top?
I think tennis needed that. The new generation or the young people standing in the top position, I think is something great.
According to Alcaraz, him and Sinner being at the top is what tennis needs. I'm not sure everyone is going to take that, but I could see where he was coming from. For so long, Novak had been at the top. Hopefully, these new faces bring more intrigue to the casual fan and drive some viewership to the sport. But I'd say this. Alcaraz is the most exciting player after the big three, at least for me. He is a generational talent. Over to you guys. What are your thoughts about Carlos Alcaraz? And which surface is best suited to his game? Also, what do you think about his tennis IQ and the coaching situation with Juan Carlos Ferrero? And how well do you see him performing at Wimbledon this year? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Smash that subscribe button if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to let me know what other topics or players you want me to cover on both the WTA and ATP tours. And if you missed out on last week's videos, no worries, I've got them showing on the screen for you right here.